What's going on, seniors? Today is April 21st, 2020. It's about 10:33 a.m. when I'm making this video. Um, we're talking a little bit more about macroeconomics, our unit. We're going to pick up the conversation today, and we're going to talk about debt because that's some real life stuff. The best part about this whole unit is a lot of the stuff you're going to be learning is hopefully going to be helpful for you in the very near future, especially for a lot of you about to move out or go to college or take on credit card debt or all these other things. Understanding how debt works and eventually when we talk about loans tomorrow is kind of important. Um, Keep a tab, especially in this unit, on current events with the coronavirus. It's impacting the global economy on a grand scale, probably unlike anything we've seen since the Great Depression. So, very volatile time, but we're going to get into that eventually. But today, let's just focus and let's talk about debt and how that affects your lives, how that affects our lives, and maybe a little bit about what's going on right now in the world. All right. So, if you haven't done so already, open up the slides. Please go ahead, uh, go to slide 6. Um, the headline should be, "What is the total amount of debt?" It's kind of this would have been a game I would have played with you, and then would have given you extra credit if you had the closest number, whatever, right? But obviously, we can't do that. So, in the meantime, um, what is debt? Well, we're going to talk about it. So, debt is when an individual, group, or institution owes money to another individual, group, or an institution. Pretty much, it means you just owe something. You owe money. If you are like, if you like, oh, Mr. Tomei, I need money to catch the bus. Can you give me $2? I'd be like, okay, just you're gonna pay me back, right? And you'd be like, okay, sure, I owe you, right? That's being in debt. You're in debt to me, and you owe me $2. If you don't give me the money, I know where you live, and I'm coming for it. But that's what debt means. Debt can be very little, like the Mr. Tomei example, $2, or it can be really big. The biggest debt that almost every one of us will ever incur is going to be buying a home. Um, Especially here in California, if you plan to live here, chances are when you want to go get a house one day, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars um, to pay back over a long period of time. And so that'll probably be the biggest debt that you'll ever have is a mortgage. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how that works. All right. Ideally, debt isn't good. You want to stay away from debt. But the reality is, we're all in debt. I'm constantly in a state of debt. Every time I swipe my credit card, I'm in debt. I owe money to pay back the credit card. We'll talk about how credit cards work eventually. That'll be more in May when we get there. Um, but the good thing is, you're not alone if you're in debt. The following slides shows you a mix of individuals, groups, institutions who are in debt and trying to figure out maybe how much debt you think people are in. So let's start off. Let's go to slide 7. How much do you think the U.S. student debt total is? Maybe you think it's hundreds of billions. Maybe you think it's only hundreds of millions. The reality, and I just looked this number up this morning, as it stands in 2020, student loans in the United States are worth over $1.5 trillion. There's about 44 million people who owe money in some amount. The average amount per person comes out to be about $37,000. It's kind of wild. And it's crazy. I mean, that's such a huge number. Here's my piece on student loans. Here's my piece that I would tell everyone about this. Because you're seniors, I'm really passionate. I'm going to give you that real talk. Student loans suck. They are not fun. They are something that, especially as someone who people in my generation, like, anyone probably under the age of 35, especially if you grew up somewhere in like San Leandro, San Lorenzo, Hayward, like in these areas, like a lot of us were the first generation to go to college. A lot of us had parents who didn't really have the income to even pay for college. So a lot of those people, my friends and I, etc., your options were, if you want to go to college, for most of us, you either had to like work hella jobs, get scholarships, financial aid, or a lot of times you had to take on student loans. So I have a lot of friends today that are still paying off student loans, right? I mean, they'll be paying it off for a long time. My advice to you, do anything you can to try and stay away from a student loan. All right. There's nothing really good about it. The only good thing is it can increase your credit score, but we'll eventually get to that. And there's other ways to increase your credit score besides getting a student loan. This is why I always say, like, if you're not really sure about where you want to go to college for like a 4 year, or you think money's going to be tight, man, just go to Chabot. And you're like, oh, Mr. Tomei, I don't want to see people from high school, Manning 2.0. Then go to like Laney or College of San Mateo. Just go to a JC. Most of you can probably get the BOG waiver. It's going to become, you'd be paying like almost nothing to go to school for 2 years, taking the same classes you would take at San Jose State, SF State, Berkeley, wherever you want to go, right? And then you're living at home. Maybe you got a job, so you're pocketing money. Maybe if your parents are chill, they're not charging you rent. And then you got 2 years to kind of grow your money, grow up, be a little more mature, figure out what you want to do. And then when you're ready to transfer 2 or 3 years later, right? Now, even if you have to take on a loan, that number is not going to be nearly as big as it would have been had you gone right out of high school and be like, yo, I'm just going to take this loan. There's a lot of pressure on you, I'm sure, from your families, people, friends, teachers especially, be like, you got to go to a 4 year, you got to go. This is me telling you, as someone who finessed the system, I didn't have to do student debt. I didn't have to get a loan. The reason being, I was pretty fortunate. I worked in college. I went to Chabot. I knew that I was going to have a job like teaching where I was never going to be able to pay back student debt in big numbers. Like I had to stop. Like I knew I was never going to be an engineer or computer scientist. Like can barely do algebra 2. Like it's kind of like that was my limit. End of math. So I knew I was going to have a job where I wasn't really going to be making the big bucks. I didn't want to be a lawyer or go to be a doctor. So you have to play the system, right? And so that's getting on the BOG waiver at Chabot. That was, getting some hookups through financial aid. Obviously having really dope parents that helped me out and helped pay for it. But working, I mean, all those things, you got to play the system because I knew I really just didn't want to take on that incurment of student loans. So my advice for you is try to avoid them. Try to find other ways to pay for school. But if worse comes to worse and you do pay it back, it's not the end of the world, but you got to be good about your payments. But here's kind of an interesting thing. And here's one of the questions for you for today's video. Go to slide number 9, please. The question is pretty simple, and it's one that's become more popular, especially over the past year or two, is the idea of student loan cancellation. Pretty much, should people who owe money, right, on their student loans, should that money be canceled, bailed out by the government, so the government pays your check, whatever you owe? There's a video there that you can watch that I'd like you to watch to help you respond to this question, but I want to hear your answer when you turn in your submission at the end of the week for these questions on these videos. Do you think that student loans should be canceled? I'm curious to hear what you think. Maybe you have a data-backed argument. But if you watch that video, it will definitely help. I know I have my opinion. I don't think it should be canceled, but that's mainly because I worked really, really hard, and I went to junior college, and I was doing sports while working, and I finessed the system, and I was stealing food at UC San Diego to that way, to keep money down. I was going to the dining halls, or I'd go to the res halls and steal people's pancakes. There's a good story I would tell you guys for another time about that. But I don't know, I hustled and grinded, and I never took a student loan. And to find out that other people, who took a student loan now just kind of get it canceled, that makes me angry. It makes me feel like I should have took a student loan and lived on the beach when I was at La Jolla. So no, I'm very anti-student loans. But maybe you have a different perspective, and I always like to be convinced because y'all are pretty smart, and most of you are going to be smarter than me one day. All right, so answer that question, get it to me by the end of the week. All right, let's go to slide 10. What do you think the U.S. government debt total is? fun fact, you probably have an idea. This number is going to be pretty big. Um, the total, and again, I looked this up this morning. The U.S. budget deficit, and what they're projecting is that it's going to quadruple to 4 trillion this year. And they say by 2023, the U.S. debt held by the public will surpass records set in World War II. That's kind of wild because obviously in a world war, the U.S. government was spending a lot of money to win a war. It's the World War, and yet we're here in 2020, and our debt is potentially going to pass the World War II years in terms of overall records. That's kind of wild. It's a lot of money. $4 trillion. To give you an idea, at Jeff Bezos' height, when he was worth $100 billion, that means it would take, quick math, see, this is why I knew I was done after Algebra 2. It would take 40 Jeff Bezos to be able to pay that off. 40 Jeff Bezos. That means 40 Amazon-like companies. There's only one Amazon-like company. I don't even know if you guys could tell me another company that's even close to that. Google, Apple, okay. There's still a little Microsoft. Okay, maybe you have 3 or 4 Disney, but could you name 40 mega companies or 40 mega rich people? I'd be surprised if you could. So that number is huge. And the reality is, are we ever going to be able to pay that off? Does it even really matter? It's kind of interesting. We've had a debt forever. The famous saying is, we owe all this money to China. Well, the nice thing about the United States in a weird way is we owe all this money, but nothing ever happens. No one ever comes to collect our debts. It's not like in the movies when like the, Italian mafia shark loan guys come in and be like, yo, where's the money? I need the money. And they got the baseball bat. The nice thing about the United States is when you got the world's best and biggest military, you usually don't have people knocking at your door for money. And that's probably a big reason why we are able to just rack up a bill like we do. All right. They're racking up a bill like when I go into like a Louis Vuitton store, I just swipe that credit card, something light. All right. Go to slide 12. This shows you a graph of the federal debt that's held and is being paid off. And so if you look at the graph, we got in 1945, it was at all-time highs. And this shows you the x-axis years, the y-axis, the percentage of the GDP. We'll talk about what the GDP is. But this just kind of goes to show you the highs and lows. And based off where we're heading, we're going to be higher than where we were on World War II. And that's tough. A lot of people ask, well, what's the problems when debt is high? Well, you got to eventually pay back the debt. But again, like I just said, we've never really had to pay back the debt. We've been in a perpetual state of debt for 25, 20 years or so. So to answer your question, I don't know. I'm not smart enough. I don't study economics enough to really tell you what's the worst thing about debt, because the reality is nothing bad has really come from it. So, yeah, it's just something you should know, though, about how much money the U.S. Owes around the world. Let's go to slide 13. What do you think U.S. debt total of mortgages is? This number? It's also going to be pretty big. So on slide 14, and I looked this up this morning, this was in the last quarter of 2019. Homeowners in the U.S. owe about $15.8 trillion on their property. It's a lot. That is a lot of money. Typically, though, with homeowners, that money's paid off. Most people pay their home payments. Historically speaking, for almost always, homes have been paid off. They were usually seen as a secure investment. Banks would give out a loan, and they know that they would get their money back plus interest. That's kind of how it worked. We're going to talk about, though, how that concept that everyone pays off their homes actually caused the 2007 recession. We'll talk about that later, though. But while the number seems big, It's because property values are in the millions of dollars, sometimes in the hundreds of millions for mega projects. You got to understand that too. It's not just think of like the home in Hayward. It's like the mega properties, the industrial properties that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars that really drive up that total mortgage debt. Um, yeah, if you own land or if you have property, it's a good financial investment. It's probably the best investment you can make because they're not building more land. And if world populations go up, more people need homes. That means the remaining amount of land that there is, it's eventually going to have to go up. Property, owning it, it's a good cash cow. It's a big investment originally, but once you own land, you can flip that property and usually make a lot of money. That's why there's shows on like A&E and stuff like retail flippers or $1 million listing, like people that flip homes, because you can make some bank doing that. It's good money if you know how to do it. It's good money. Let's go to slide 15. What is the total credit card debt in the U.S.? Man, I'd be driving that up when I'm on Amazon. There's nothing else to do. I've been buying PlayStation 2 games because I've been so bored. Oh, man. We go to slide 16. The debt, it's estimated about $1 trillion. An average of about 8,000 people, or 8,000 per person, people owe about $8,000. That's kind of wild. I don't think I've ever allowed my credit card to ever get that high, but I've had it in a couple thousands before. Um, Basically, and we'll go more into detail with this in our personal finance kind of unit. The way a credit card works, it's a piece of plastic. There's credit card companies like Visa and MasterCard, uh, and they have all this money. And let's say you want to buy something, but you don't have the cash, or you know you're going to get paid at the end of the month, so you'll have the money later. What you do is you swipe the piece of plastic, or nowadays you chip it or tap it, and the credit card company pays for you. They're like, "Yo, we got you, Tomei. Like, you want to buy that new PlayStation 2 game? Like, I got you." I'm like, "Thanks, fam." But eventually, I got to pay it back, and you typically have to pay back by a certain amount, a certain date, typically by the end of the month. Doesn't mean you have to pay it all back at one time. Like, let's say the game costs $20 and I paid $10 at the end of the month, but eventually I need to pay off that money. And so what a lot of people do is they pay off a little bit every month and then hopefully eventually pay back all of it. My suggestion and advice to you though is try and keep that credit card bill low, or when you pay it back, try and pay it back in full. It's going to look good on your credit score, and it just forces you to kind of have good habits about being responsible with your money and manage your money well. All right. So this is the video for today. We're going to stop here. Tomorrow we're going to talk about loans. Keep your spirits up. Keep doing your thing. I think next week we might have like an actual Zoom class, just to check in with everyone. Kind of debating if I want to do that or not, but I'll let you know for sure. But keep your spirits up. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, let me know. Make sure you answer the question about should student loans be canceled, yes or no. Just a couple sentences, a paragraph at most. If you really want to get into it, you could write a little bit more. I just want to know your thoughts. Besides that, have a good day, stay safe, and I will be talking to you soon. See ya.